Greetings and welcome to Growth Hacking Secrets. I'm your host, Mohammed Siddique from Atlanta, Georgia, and the co-author of New Success Secrets available on Amazon. On this episode, we have a special guest, Frederick Lane. Frederick is the co-founder at the Center for Cyberethics. And please join me to give a warm welcome to our guest, Frederick Lane.
Thank you very
Frederick,
much, Mohammed.
thank you so much for coming. And let me start with this. Where were you? What happened? Who you were surrounded with that inspired you to get involved in cybersecurity, cyber ethics, cyber traps, yes, everything to do with the cyber.
Well, I've been working with computers since I was 9 years old, so that means almost 50 years. And I combined that with a trip through law school where I became fascinated with the legal issues around that. The other driving piece for me was the fact that I spent 10 years on the Burlington, Vermont School Board. And when I was on the board, I had a chance to watch the impact of technology on the teachers in the school district, on the schools themselves. And of course, the last piece is that I'm dad and stepdad to 4 boys who all grew up during the rise of the World Wide Web. So I had hands-on experience dealing with these issues.
Wonderful. So I'm sure, so you are the cybersecurity expert.
I'm one of many, many people out there who specialize in this area, but my particular focus is on the impact of technology on society. So although I'm not the kind of cybersecurity expert who would necessarily go in and secure your network, my focus is more broadly on the way in which technology is impacting how we behave and what the risks are arising out of the use of digital devices, which is, I use the umbrella term cyber traps to talk about those issues.
Okay. So I have a bundle, tons of questions. Let's get going. What are the top 3 mistakes to avoid?
Well, I think the top 3 mistakes for me personally, in terms of my journey to where I am now, was number 1, not choosing the right area of law to go into as an attorney. Because when I came out of law school, I moved to Vermont and started working in the field of insurance defense. And it was very confrontational, and I'm not a confrontational person. So I didn't know myself well enough going into that. So that was number 1. I think number 2 is having a better sense of what I do and don't do well. And so that kind of negotiation and that kind of confrontational work was not something I should have been doing. I'm much better at explaining things to people. I'm much better at writing, but I didn't know that when I got done with law school, and I wish I had. And then the third thing I would say is don't overextend yourself. I think that when I was starting out and doing the writing and the computer consulting that led to where I am now, there were definitely times when I tried to jump ahead in terms of what I was spending money on, like an office or an assistant. So you need to be much more careful about how you move forward.
Wonderful. So, Frederick, you did leave some clue in the answers, and here that leads to my next question. What are your greatest failure story? What did you learn, and how did you recover from it?
Well, the obvious piece of that is that my legal career came to a fairly abrupt end because I wasn't good at it and I wasn't doing well at it. So there's no question that when you set out to become a lawyer and you stop being a lawyer, that's a big sense of failure, right? It's not the way things are supposed to turn out. So I will tell you that, again, this sense of self-knowledge would have made a big difference. For instance, if I had come out of law school and I had gone into educational law, or I had gone into technology law or intellectual property even, I suspect I'd still be practicing law because I love those and they motivate me to do well. But I made a different choice due to a lack of self-awareness. And that was a real lesson right there. And then the other thing is, I think that one of the biggest benefits that comes out of all of that is developing a sense of humility, a sense of awareness of the potential for failure and the drive to avoid it. And the realization that everybody goes through difficult times and you need to be empathetic about what people go through.
Wonderful. That's amazing. What are your top three success secrets that others can model from?
Well, I think they're attitudinal things, to be honest with you, Mohammed. So I think number one, resilience, right? It was a really difficult stretch to go through. But one of the things that kept me going was a sense of stubbornness, a hope that my work could eventually be meaningful to other people. That, of course, implies perseverance. You need to keep at it. You need to understand that things don't happen overnight, that, particularly if you're changing your life plan, which is what I did. And so it was going to take a lot of time to rebuild a career. And then the last thing is to, I think, be aware of what is happening around you and to be creative as you can in terms of how you respond, so that you're not simply stuck with the same patterns, but trying something new makes a huge difference in terms of your ability to move forward.
You like to give any bonus success tip? Because when it comes to knowledge, we are greedy. So I want to ask one more success secret.
I think the bonus piece of information is to draw strength from the people around you who believe in you and are willing to support your work, which is to say, I think for a lot of men in particular, we have a hard time embracing that kind of friendship. And I have learned over my my years doing this that kind of support and encouragement is absolutely vital, and we should open ourselves up to it.
Wonderful. You passed my test of being a surprise bonus for you. So are you are you ready? Are we ready for a lightning round? Quick question, quick answer.
Shoot them at me.
Okay, let's go. What are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for my family, my wife, who's a tremendous partner in all of this, my children, and my siblings.
How young are you?
The calendar says that I'm 58. But
Oh,
that
yeah, Frederick, you are not 58. You are 18 years old with a 40 years experience.
well, I'll tell you, my joints disagree sometimes, but but thank you.
Okay. What you want to do when you grow up?
I would like to honestly continue what I've been doing for the last 15 or 20 years, but add onto it layers that extend the reach of the education that I'm trying to do. This is one of the reasons that we're in the process of incorporating the Center for Cyberethics, because I feel that it can be a platform for helping to protect people from some of the risks associated with technology.
How do you overcome a challenge life throws at you?
Uh, I think by trusting in the goals that you set for yourself in terms of the work that you're doing, by turning to friends and to your partner for support, and listening to people even when they give you advice you don't want to hear.
Mm. Tell me more about that one.
Well, I think that there's a great scene in Jerry Maguire where Kelly Preston tells Tom Cruise that she always promised him brutal honesty, and his response is classic. I think you put the word brutal in there, but the point is well taken, that you need friends who will honestly tell you what they think about how your work is going, whether or not you're making mistakes, and you should listen to them.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great advice. How do you start your day?
I start my day with a pot of Assam tea and a surf through the news to keep up with what's emerging in terms of technology and politics and sociology. And then I ease my way into breakfast and my writing.
Wonderful. What is the advice you will give it to younger yourself?
Know thyself sooner. Maybe consider the possibility of spending some time with a therapist to learn to understand, your emotional state and the things that are important to you. And then I think be more self-aware and self-honest about what you're good at and what you're not good at, and get to that place faster.
Wonderful. Once you have a revenue generating idea, how do you convince your significant other?
My wife is a professor. And so the answer to that is do your homework and make sure that you can really defend whatever argument or proposal you're putting forward. That's the critical thing. And along with those, 40 odd years of experience beyond my 18-year-old self, you begin to develop a better understanding of people who have credibility and a grounded nature in terms of their ability to work with you and be successful. You get, I think, a little bit better at separating the wheat from the chaff, and that's a huge life lesson to learn.
Wonderful. What is the impactful book you have read, and what did you learn from it?
Well, you asked me to bring a book cover, but my books are mostly electronic these days. Nonetheless, I printed out that cover of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning because, I would argue that that is the single most impactful book, most profoundly impactful book that I've read over the course of my lifetime. It's broken into two parts. The first half being his recitation of his experience during the Holocaust in a concentration camp. And then the second is his efforts as a psychologist to understand how we integrate an experience like that into our lives and how we should frame the work that we do. And the basic point that I took away from this is that if your work is meaningful to the world, to yourself, then the external indicia of success are less important. That the challenge is to find work that has its own independent meaning to the world.
Wonderful. Why being impactful is important to you?
Well, I think life is a gift, honestly. And I think that we have an obligation to give back for that very act of being. So there's that. And then we also live in a society where I think that we have an obligation to each other to make the world safer, better, hopefully kinder. And these are all things that are deeply important to me in terms of what I am sharing with the world. So I want my work to reflect those values.
The word kinder is a very important one. So,
I agree with you.
yeah, who is your mentor and what's the impact on you?
This was the question, Mohammed, I think I had the biggest struggle with, because I would say that I've had different mentors in different stages of my life. And I'm not sure there's anyone I could point to today who is in that role for me right now. But looking back, there's absolutely no question that my father and my mother both filled that role for me. There certainly have been professors and teachers as I've grown up who at different times have filled that role. It's been a little bit trickier when I've engaged in the work that I do because I'm very much a solo writer, a freelancer. But actually, one of the things I'm hoping is that as we incorporate the Center for Cyberethics, that there will be people on the board who can fill that role as we try to start this new foundation.
What do you want to be remembered for?
I would like in the end to be remembered for decency, for kindness, for a sense of humor, and for a passion for educating people about how to navigate this new world safely.
Who is your ideal client?
Well, my ideal client, really, I think for the last decade has been a school district or a school that is committed to educating its teachers and its staff on how to interact with children safely, on how to protect themselves from the kinds of risks that I research and write about. Looking forward, what I'm hoping is that our ideal client will be parents or other adults who are willing to look at this issue of cyber ethics and incorporate it into their family life or into their personal life so that we can make the online world less hostile.
Hey, just as a follow-up, how many school districts you have worked with?
In the last decade, I would say I've probably worked with 150, 200 school districts across the country. And actually, I've done some work in Canada and China as well.
Yeah. This is a worldwide issue. It's not a US
No,
issue.
That's absolutely correct.
It affects every family all over the world. Okay, that's what that is.
Yep.
How can we support you?
Well, there's several ways you can support me. I would encourage people to look at my books on frederickLane.com or cybertraps.com, which is on the screen. They're also on Amazon. I would love to have people subscribe to the podcast that we do, the Cybertraps podcast, which is on Apple or other podcast players. And then lastly, when we get our Center for Cyberethics up and running this spring, I really do hope that people will support the mission of that nonprofit.
Yeah, cybertraps.com. So in order to avoid the traps of cyber,
That's exactly right.
get on cybertraps.com and educate yourself, because your little education can put you in a much safer place online.
That's exactly right. And when they go to cybertraps.com, there are links to all of my books. We've got all of our podcast episodes there. And each week, I produce a list of the leading headlines of the cyber traps that have arisen that week. So it's a great way to educate yourself very quickly about some of the issues you should be aware of.
You got a one loyal reader for yourself. Just want you to know.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
So no, it's coming from a trusted source. I know it's not a fake anymore. So what would you say about your today's guest experience on the show?
I would like to thank you, as I said at the beginning when we were first chatting, about how valuable I found it to reflect on some of the questions that you raised. That, I think, is a rare opportunity given how fast everything happens in the world right now. So I have enjoyed this a great deal, and it's been a great opportunity for me. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words. What would you say as a final word?
Well, what I would say as a final word is that we should always remember that when it comes to technology, it's not about the technology itself. It's about our behavior as human beings. And we all should take responsibility for the world that we create. And so we should bring to technology the values that we would want to have in the society around us: kindness, decency, patience, empathy. These are all qualities that technology will push us to ignore, and we shouldn't do that.
Yeah, my last word is kindness. I love the kindness part. Thank you so much for Frederick
My
Lane for
pleasure.
sharing your wisdom with us today on the behalf of Growth Hacking Secrets community and our entire team. We really appreciate you. This is Mohammed Siddique signing off from Atlanta, Georgia. Until the next episode, all good wishes.